After we had completed the production, I brought a quarter-inch of it home with me and played it for my wife at the time. She immediately burst into tears, and I thought to myself, well, she feels the same way I do. Last but not least, this. Fans of Pink Floyd have been witnesses to one of the most acrimonious rivalries in the history of rock music for nearly 4 decades. Roger Waters and David Gilmour, the creative minds behind some of the most iconic records in the history of music, have been engaged in a conflict that has resulted in the dissolution of one of the most successful bands in the world. On the other hand, Roger Waters has finally disclosed the true cause for his loathing of David Gilmour, which is a terrible and vulnerable moment for him. His admissions go much further than disagreements over creative ideas or disagreements over financial matters. It is a confession that is so unfiltered and intimate that it elucidates the resentment that has been harbored for decades and discloses the devastating human cost of artistic ability. Fans of Pink Floyd who have always placed their trust in a reconciliation will be devastated by the truth, given that what Waters has said makes it very evident that certain scars will never be able to heal. Explore the heartbreaking truth that lies behind one of the most terrible feuds in the history of music. Establishing the groundwork for creative warfare. In order to comprehend the breathtaking revelation made by Roger Waters, it is necessary to investigate the manner in which their collaboration evolved into a struggle for creative control. Around the middle of the 1970s, Waters had effectively assumed the role of artistic director for Pink Floyd. Waters progressively dominated songwriting and conceptual development throughout the course of The Dark Side of the Moon, despite the fact that the album had been collaborative in nature. It was during the time of The Wall, in 1979, that the situation reached its breaking point. Utilizing his own life experiences as a source of inspiration, Waters conceived of the record as his personal statement. Despite the fact that Gilmour's guitar work was fundamental to the band's sound, his contributions were increasingly perceived as secondary as a result of this. A further confirmation of Waters' conviction that he was the genuine creative genius behind Pink Floyd was provided by the album's continued success. The most devastating blow was delivered in 1983 with the release of the final cut, which many people believe to be Waters' solo album. After some time had passed, Gilmour expressed his annoyance by saying, "I didn't even want to be on it. This album is not a Pink Floyd release. The album belongs to Roger." Because of this marginalization, animosity was developed, which would continue to grow for decades. The domination of Waters was not acquired by chance. For Gilmour, it was a purposeful attempt to seize authority, which resulted in a sensation of creative stifling. The delicate equilibrium that had allowed Genesis to sustain themselves through their most successful period was beginning to fall apart as a result of Waters' desire to have complete control. The explosive animosity that Waters would later admit to holding was a direct result of this dynamic, which laid the stage for it. This is the confession of jealousy that shocked the entire world. Over the course of an unexpected interview in the year 2023, Roger Waters revealed a confession that caused shockwaves to travel throughout the Pink Floyd community. For the very first time, he stated that his animosity for David Gilmour was not based on artistic differences, but rather on feelings of envy and confidence in his own abilities. The revelation made by Waters was that I believe I had a strong dislike for David at the time, because he was everything that I was not: charismatic, smooth, and likable. Perhaps I was simply envious of the fact that his instrument was able to convey feelings when I was always unable to do it with my words. For Waters, who had spent decades portraying himself as the cerebral superior, this moment of weakness was unusual. Waters had spent decades portraying himself by himself. It was revealed through the confession that Pink Floyd was engaged in psychological warfare. Despite the fact that Waters considered himself to be the band's brain, he harbored a deep-seated resentment for Gilmour, who was considered to be the band's heart. According to Waters, I had a deep-seated hatred for him because, in some way, people viewed him as the heart, while I was the head. Nevertheless, we were both dependent on one another, and perhaps that is the tragedy. Consequently, every public disagreement was reframed in light of this revelation. In reality, the things that fans perceived to be issues with Waters' artistic choices were actually expressions of his uneasiness regarding his own likability. Gilmour has the innate attraction that made him popular with fans as well as musicians, in contrast to Waters, who was capable of crafting intricate or complicated storylines. Although the rivalry extended to their respective positions in the accomplishments, it was impossible to ignore the fact that Gilmour's guitar work was as important. Because of this, a severe paradox was established. However, Waters harbored resentment toward Gilmour because of his vital role in the realization of his goal: confrontation in the courts and public disgrace. Both of the men were heartbroken as a result of Waters' envy, which manifested itself in legal fights and public insults. As Pink Floyd demonstrated the extent of his hate, his attempts to stop Gilmour and Nick Mason from completing their work after he left in 1985 highlighted the extent of his hatred. The purpose of Waters' legal claim was not simply to question the name of the band. Rather, it was to undermine Gilmour's capacity to carry on without him. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Waters stated that the individuals in question stole something that was not only mine, but also not wholly theirs. My departure coincided with the conclusion of Pink Floyd's tour. His conviction that Pink Floyd would not be able to survive without his leadership was made clear by this. During the conflict became more personal. The continuation of Gilmour's career, in Waters' opinion, was both illegitimate and a personal insult. It was impossible for him to accept the fact that the band could be successful without him, particularly after their albums were released after Waters, which were both critically and commercially successful. The attacks in public got more acrimonious and personal. The criticism that Waters leveled against Gilmour's playing was that it was beautiful but soulless. Gilmour retorted by saying that with Roger, it was his way or the highway. The Live 8 reunion in 2005, which was supposed to help them rebuild their relationship, instead brought their anger to the forefront. Despite the fact that it was really uncomfortable, Waters stated that playing together again was a wonderful experience for the fans, the feud within the family, and the personal attacks. As soon as members of the family became engaged, the amount of animosity reached a toxic level. As of the year 2020, Waters asserted that Gilmour had banned him from Pink Floyd's website, stating that David believes he is the only owner of everything. The fact that they were not allowed to participate in the band's activities demonstrated that they remain resentful. In February of 2023, the situation became extremely volatile when Polly Sampson, who was married to Gilmour, launched a blistering attack on Twitter. She accused Waters of being anti-Semitic, misogynistic, and an apologist for Vladimir Putin. When Gilmour stood up for his wife and declared that what she said was accurate, it became abundantly evident that the hostility had spread throughout both families. However, what made Waters' confession so painful was the fact that he admitted that this disagreement had cost him more than simply a professional relationship. Would it have been possible for Pink Floyd to continue producing masterpieces? What if Waters had defeated his feelings of envy? Fans who were denied of the opportunity to experience potential greatness due to personal hatred are haunted by the question. Despite the fact that both men were becoming older, Waters' animosity became so pervasive that it prevented them from reconciling. The passing of Richard Wright in 2008 served as a reminder to everyone that time was ultimately running out. Nonetheless, even this tragedy was not enough to close the gap that Waters' jealousy had built. Fans have been left in utter disbelief as a result of the tragic legacy of Waters' statement, which indicates that their feud was never about differences in creative expression. Jealousy was the driving force behind the dissolution of one of the most successful musical teams. This has repercussions that are not limited to the two individuals, but rather affect Pink Floyd's entire legacy. One of the most disappointing aspects is the way in which it reinterprets the band's history. As time has passed, fans who had believed that the wounds would heal now realize that the animosity is too deep. Jealousy was not a fleeting emotion for Waters. Rather, it was an essential component in his judgment of Gilmour. Because of the confession, every attempt to get back together was unsuccessful. The performance that took place at Live 8 in 2005 was marred by an underlying tension, as Waters has recently acknowledged. His assertion that we both needed each other, and perhaps that is the tragedy, concedes that their relationship was necessary. However, his envy made it impossible for them to continue working together. The terrible understanding that some of Pink Floyd's greatest music evolved from this toxic relationship is a realization that fans will find to be devastating. Masterpieces such as Comfortably Numb were created as a result of the tension that existed between Waters' vision and Gilmour's expression. Having this knowledge, however, alters our understanding of these songs, since it reveals that the source of the friction was not healthy rivalry, but rather hatred. It is the human cost of artistic genius that is brought to light by Waters' confession. His confession sheds light on the psychological toll that comes with being a member of one of the most popular bands in the world. It was eventually the strain that brought about the destruction of their partnership, which in turn denied the world of decades of potential collaboration. Given that both men are now in their 70s, it appears that reconciliation is not conceivable. The truthful statement made by Waters could have been therapeutic if it had been made several decades earlier. However, at this point, it mostly explains why fans of Pink Floyd will never see their favorites come together again. The most depressing feature is that it elucidates the reasons why Pink Floyd will never finally be able to come together again. Jealousy was not a fleeting emotion for Waters. Rather, it was an essential component of their relationship, which ultimately led to the dissolution of one of the most successful musical partnerships. Do you have any thoughts? Does Waters' admission make their animosity for one another more tragic? Post your thoughts in the comments section below. Please make sure to click the notification bell, like this video, and subscribe to Facts Verse so that you can receive further heartbreaking tales from the world of rock music. We appreciate you watching.